Welcome to Beyond the Press Release, our production of Gorecom, in which we take the time to speak with small cap executives about big important news. And guys, if you love small cap mining, mega cap partners, spinouts, gold, nickel, it's unbelievable because Manitou Gold has got it all. For those of you who knew the story and maybe saw this the great nickel headline that we talk about, Manitou controls 100% of the Goudreau Project in Northern Ontario. Where they were and are in search of gold, Canada's next gold discovery, maybe even a mine. But on top of that, they now have nickel, which has been added to the discovery list, and so good that they're going to spin it out, the discovery, into a brand new pubco, essentially creating two Juggernaut companies on the same land package capable of making separate metal discoveries. And they're not doing it alone. They're supported by two majors. Alamos, a $4 billion producer, owns 19.99% of the company. O3 Mining, 9.99% of the company. And they're both sitting on the board and helping the balance sheet because they've actually invested their hard-earned money in the company. So why all the craze for Manitou? 10 million ounces of gold resource and reserves are being developed and mined on their western flank, including Alamos's 1.3 million ounce high-grade island mine and Argonaut Gold's 2.1 million ounce planned open pit gold mine and mill. So they're sitting in elephant country. And if that wasn't enough, if the story ended there, you'd say, hey, great, this is a fantastic company. But on top of that, like I said, this nickel discovery within the same land package is being spun out into Western Nickel Corp. That's where nickel, cobalt, and PGEs. And they think it's comparable to Canada Nickel's Crawford deposit and Dumont Nickel's deposit as well. Here to talk about it is Richard. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you very much, George. It's my pleasure.
Hey, the latest headline, Manitou Gold intersects 200, I'm going to round this up, 231 meters of 0.25% nickel equivalent at Goudreau, further confirming significant nickel cobalt discovery. That's I had the headline. I had to read that. How big and how important are these results in layman's terms, just big picture?
Well, these sort of multi-100-meter intersections, they don't happen every day. You drew the analogy with Canada Nickel's Crawford deposit. They certainly have, multi-100-meter intersections. The neat thing about that is when we went out, those recent results you just quoted, they're fantastic, but that's the third of three holes. Yep. All three holes that we set out to drill recently, we were planning on two different of these nickel-bearing intrusions. One of them, in which we drilled two holes, is quite large. It had never been drilled for nickel or any other commodity, never drill tested. And to come out with the sort of widths that we expected, and actually the same grade that we had in our discovery hole, being at 0.25 nickel with cobalt credits on top of that. This is the sort of material that, we've got three holes plus a discovery hole into two different intrusions, 30 intrusions in total identified by us. 10 of them have been visited on the ground, grab samples, all averaging 0.25% nickel. This is the sort of material, and the way these rocks are hosting the nickel, you can actually block out and put together big volumes of mineralization, assuming that the numbers hold up coming back from the lab. You can put big numbers together very, very quickly. Case in point, you mentioned the Dumont deposit, as well as the Crawford deposit. These are, 2 billion plus ton deposits. They're massive, massive, massive deposits. The grades that we're intersecting being, again, 0.25% nickel, cobalt credits. That's totally in line with these other deposits.
Wow, that's saying a lot.
Yeah, and if you compare the scale of these things, billion-ton ballpark at 0.25 nickel, for your listeners that are more sort of tuned into gold, these things are akin to, like value in the ground, something in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 million ounce gold deposits. These are massive, massive value projects.
And by the way, I want to confirm, because what you said earlier, all three drill holes have intersected mineralized intervals in excess of 200 meters.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, we designed these holes to drill, from one side of these intrusions. They tend to be oblong, like oval shaped type things. So we drill across the the shortest axis, and we were expecting to get north of 200 meters in each hole, and we did. And the uncanny thing is not only that, the grades held up very, very consistently as compared to the grab samples we took in 10 of these intrusions and our discovery hole, all running 0.25.
So that just further strengthens the case for spinning this out into a new co, Western Nickel Corp. What's the status of that? We might as well talk about that, because I think that's what's exciting both current investors and new prospective investors. What's the basic status update you can get us on the spin out?
Manitou Gold has got two fantastic gold assets: a Goudreau Project, on which we've made this discovery in the first quarter of this year. Our Dryden Project up in northwestern Ontario, which has been optioned off to Dryden Gold. And, Manitou is going to maintain a gold focus. When we found this nickel mineralization in the first quarter and looked at the potential we have with these 30 intrusions and nickel type intrusions in total on the property, it really made sense to spin out the nickel assets. Typically,
Sure.
in holding companies, they trade at a discount to the sum of all the assets. We don't want Manitou to lose its focus on gold exploration, and secondly, I think our shareholders are going to be better served by having full valuation in the marketplace for two separate commodity focused companies, being Manitou Gold and new company Western Nickel Corp.
Yeah, that's fantastic for all of us, for our Manitou shareholders. That's great news. Let's get back to the nickel itself. You said earlier you've got 30 targets. What's the plan for exploring those? And do you have a priority list of importance yet with respect to those 30 targets?
So again, we've got drill holes into 2 of these intrusions already. We've, out of the 30 that we are aware of, we still have crews in the field, but we've been to 10 of them. We've taken grab samples. Again, the results of those are the same grades, 0.25. And there's sort of a range between 0.22 and up to 0.28. So obviously, in terms of, pursuant to getting a spin out finalized and financed, this would be really a drilling story, not so much geophysics or geology, just drilling. And we would envisage a couple drills, one in the area detailing a little bit towards the resource in the area where we've got the 4 holes. There are numerous intrusions within a few kilometers there. And then property wide, we're covering about 35 kilometer trend where these other 28, largely most of the 28 intrusions are located. I would plan on having a second diamond drill, testing these separate intrusions, starting with the ones that we know about in terms of grade. Some of the ones that were 0.25 and better % nickel. I think that would be a sort of a rover drill, one focused on delineating the ones that we have already started on. So
what's the appetite? You mentioned earlier at the you started that answer, and rightfully so, with if everything goes well with the spin out, because obviously there are things you got to do, but it's pretty normal course. And then if you guys get funding in Western Nickel, what's the general appetite for high quality nickel projects? So we know Canada Nickel, we were talking about it, got $50 million in their last raise. What's the appetite today for the kind of asset that you're going to be bringing to Western Nickel?
Globally, the nickel market's pretty close to balance between surplus and excess supply. That's changing rapidly. The more sort of battery electrics that are coming online, not just vehicles, but all energy source where you want storage, you need a lot of nickel. So that demand's coming up. There is a lot of supply in Asia right now coming out of the Philippines. That's a different quality of nickel. Typically the nickel sulfides and their end high purity products that are similar to what we would be looking at within our property. These are always going to demand a premium. So I think that the future prospects of the nickel market, like fundamentally, they're incredibly strong. We've seen very strong demand over the last 12 months in even exploration stage investments through large funds. And these projects that are getting somewhat more advanced towards full definitive feasibility. There are many, many multinational buyers out there from South Korea, Europe, North American buyers are basically lining up to secure nickel product.
Yeah, a lot of big promises being made by a lot of governments out there with respect to electric vehicles and targets for 2030, 2035. And I don't think the masses understand how much nickel is going to be required, and in a hurry, right, Richard?
Absolutely. Well,
we need a lot of nickel. We need it now.
That's right. And you're seeing, auto manufacturers, Tesla, GM, just yesterday announced they're partnering with miners now. That's unheard of in the past.
They're going direct.
You haven't seen anything like this. And then when it comes to renewable energy, when solar farms collect a lot of the sunshine and energy, gets stored in batteries. Well, guess what is in these batteries? Tons of nickel. Any lithium ion battery, don't be fooled. It's not just lithium in there. There's a ton of nickel in these batteries, much more nickel, in fact, than lithium.
Do you ever pinch yourself sometime thinking that, hey, you went into Goudreau with this unbelievable, and we haven't talked about the gold side, and we've talked about it before, and we'll have more conversations in the future, but that you went in just thinking about gold, and now you've got an incredible nickel, discovery here on the same land package. You ever just pinch yourself sometimes?
Well, there's a little bit of serendipity, and the history, George. It took us years to consolidate the land package we have.
Yep.
It took us a couple of years of an awful lot of geotechnical work, like really detailed geophysics, geochem studies, a lot of geology went into our gold targeting. And so when we had a little bit of good fortune and made that discovery at the beginning of this year, the nickel discovery, we sort of were able to hit the ground running because we'd done so much of the geotechnical work. We knew exactly where all these 30 intrusions were because we'd done the work already. So our targeting is basically done. That's the real nice thing about it. And that's what I said. If we can successfully get the spin out executed and financed, it instantly becomes a drilling project, not a geotechnical project. So, on day one, we sort of, with one drill, as I said, you start defining what may be a resource with one drill, and the other drills are rover testing 28, the remainder of the 30 targets that isn't being drilled off with a resource target in mind.
Yeah, unbelievable. By the way, what I love about our interviews is that we don't get too much into geology speak, because most people just wouldn't understand anyways, and it would be great sleeping material. So with that in mind, I want to have a little bit of geology speak, which is, in layman's terms, can you describe what ultramafic rock is? Because you guys have gone out of your way to say that, we've got these mineralized intervals of ultramafic rocks. So let's get a little geology speak and why everyone should understand why that's important to accelerating this discovery.
All right, so I'll get a little bit technical with you. The first thing I'll do is correct your pronunciation, ultramafic. So these rocks, they're pretty unique. They don't, they're not rare, but they don't commonly occur at surface. They're sourced from the mantle. They're very, very rich in magnesium, iron, and nickel, as well as cobalt and potentially platinum, palladium, or PGE metals. So the way they get to surface is very large scale structures, big fault systems. They have to be very deep seated to allow these magmas to come right from the mantle all the way up through the crust to be in place at or near surface. And then subsequently in the Canadian Shield, we've had, overlying rocks and stuff scraped off by glaciers. So they come from very, very deep below the crust. They're very enriched in metals and important to us, nickel, cobalt, PGEs. And it's not just the fact of getting them to surface. That's not a prize or a means to any end. You have to liberate the nickel. It's locked up in silicate minerals, these glassy, if you look at a coarse grain granite or any other coarse grain rocks, all the minerals look kind of glassy. They're silicate minerals. So those are not really amenable to extracting metal from. What happens with these ultramafic rocks is they get altered in a process called serpentinization. They get a little bit green colored, hence the reference to the snake name, serpent. And in that process of breaking these initial glassy minerals down into these subsequent serpentine type minerals, the nickel gets liberated out. Nickel and iron get liberated out. So you have minerals, nickel minerals, very high purity nickel minerals. In fact, some of these aren't even nickel sulfides. They're nickel iron alloys that we're intersecting. We've done a fair bit of scientific work using a microprobe, which is a sort of a university-based, like very high precision instrument. At our project, we've actually determined that there is no detectable nickel left in these silicates. It's been a complete process of breaking these the parent minerals down, liberating that nickel, cobalt, platinum, palladium out. So that's a big opportunity for us. A lot of these projects similar to ours, one thing they've got is, a metallurgical mountain to climb. You have to determine how much of that nickel is actually recoverable.
And that's the point I want to make. That's why I'm glad you answered this question. Not all nickel is the same, right?
No,
just because I have the nickel doesn't mean I can actually extract it. It doesn't mean I can get it and extract it.
Yeah,
well enough to make it economical.
One of these unaltered, fresher ultramafics, and you try to extract the nickel, it just won't work. You have to put it through that alteration process, that serpentinization. Then the nickel gets liberated out of those particular silicates, and it becomes extractable. So that's when you said, what do you do when you hit the ground running? Well, a couple of diamond drills, it's a real drilling story. And then we look at how do we start to look at our recoveries, and how do we optimize those recoveries. But I think the good news is, and I mentioned that microprobe analysis, there's no nickel left in these silicates. It's all in high purity sulfides or nickel alloys.
And how big of a difference does that make when it comes to economic? Just generally speaking, I'm not as specific about here, but in terms of making a project economical, how big of an advantage is it that your nickel is in that state?
Well, these these types of projects, similar projects, and again, I'll take Crawford as an example. They're able, and I think we would be in the same boat, able to extract, the vast majority of the nickel out of the whole rock. But not only that, because these nickel minerals are such high purity ones, and even alloys, then you create a very, very high purity concentrate. And that's sort of the bane of any base metal mine across the shield in Canada. If you don't have a high grade concentrate to send to a smelter or refinery, you have a problem with transportation costs. And the types of nickel minerals that we're seeing, and they're seeing at Crawford and a lot at the Dumont project, these do produce very high quality, high purity concentrates of nickel of sufficient value. Basically, these things could be shipped basically anywhere. We wouldn't be, looking at what's the nearest smelter. We'd be looking at, what is the most economical and efficient smelter for us to be using.
Man, that's a massive advantage, especially nowadays.
Absolutely. I should note too, our Goudreau project, we're in mining country. You mentioned the mines in the area, it's logging country. The Trans-Canada CN rail line, the CP rail line traverses through the center of our property. There's a major east-west power line crossing through the property, and it's accessible by road. So we've got all these advantages in terms of infrastructure, transportation, and at the same time, I think we're optimistic that we'll see the work done that proves this could be a very high quality nickel product that can be shipped either to Sudbury. Just remember, there's 2 smelters, 1 refinery in Sudbury, Thompson. Further east in Quebec, there's also smelters. the types of values that we're seeing in comparable deposits are very, very high, so that they easily offset transportation costs.
Yeah, and to have that flexibility is really key, is really awesome. Last question. We're into Q4. We're well into Q4 now. What should investors expect for the rest of the calendar year? I won't even ask about 2023 because there's so much going on. The rest of the calendar year, how to ballpark, what should everyone be expecting?
So as we work our way through the process of realizing the spin out, I think we're going to have a lot of news towards that. Ultimately, one key important piece of news will be a setting of a record date. And that record date is going to be important. And the process that we've described and publicly disclosed is that existing shareholders of Manitou will receive shares of our spin out Western Nickel Corp on a pro rata basis if you're a shareholder before the record date. And if you end up being purchasing Manitou shares after the record date, you would not be receiving Western Nickel stock when the spin out occurs. So that's very important. That's a lot of the news flow that's going to be coming out, is updates with respect to the spin out. We've got these results in hand now, so we're just sort of ramping up in terms of getting in front of a lot of the smart money managers, fund managers, brokers. We're very much convinced that Manitou Gold, we've got a market cap of, depending on what day and the price action is, between about 12 and 15 million dollars. We feel strongly that we're undervalued just based on the land position we have with respect to gold. And it's a proven gold camp. There was a transaction for a much smaller piece of property to the west of us a couple of years ago. It was north of a $20 million valuation US, and we're trading at a massive discount to that. We do have many gold targets ready to go. If we had a budget for 10,000 meters worth of drilling, the holes are ready to go already. So just the land value plus the gold targets we have, we're vastly undervalued. And we see the nickel spin out as a complete freebie to shareholders. So we're going to continue to update the market, update our shareholders through press releases as we go through the stages to realize this spin out. So this is what the audience should be staying tuned for, is continued updates as we get closer and closer to realizing the spin out.
Well, Richard, I think I speak on behalf of all shareholders when I say, thanks for what you guys have accomplished to date. And like you said earlier in this interview, that was years of work, that nobody appreciated, that nobody saw, putting the land package together, getting all that done. And now putting us in position for a spin out on top of that nickel is fantastic. And we wish you all, great success and great luck, because your success is our success. But congratulations, my friend. You guys done something really great there at Manitou.
Yeah, thanks a lot, George. And as a very large shareholder myself, I look forward to the market re-rating and catch up. I've seen this a couple times in the past in things that I've worked on for a long time. You just sort of keep your head down, work away. You don't get recognition until suddenly, boom, everybody wants to own it. So
the overnight 10-year success story, like they say.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It takes a little bit of leadership, the old saying, like, everybody wants to be the first guy in second place, right? But once somebody, gets a little bit bold and makes that big initial step, I think that we've done a reasonable job in getting this story out in front of the gold, and now the nickel is in front of a lot of different eyes and smart investors. I think if we see some real leadership in the marketplace, that re-rating could happen anytime.
Well, we'll be watched for that. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us, Richard. As always, man, you always do a great job of talking to everybody and explaining in layman's terms what's going on. I can't wait to have you back.
Well, thanks a lot, George. It's always a pleasure.
To everybody at home, you've been watching or you've been listening by podcast on Spotify, Google, Apple, your favorite podcast platform. To Richard Murphy, CEO of Manitou Gold, trades in Canada under MTU. For friends in the US, under MNTUF. For those new to the story, you've heard this. You want to do more due diligence, 2 steps. First, get to the company's profile page on Agoracom. We've got it all really neatly laid out for you in summary form. 5 minutes. You get that real amazing understanding of Manitou. And then once you're armed with that base knowledge, head over to the Manitou website, do your deep dive due diligence. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day. See you next time. Hey guys, the video's over, but don't forget to help your company by liking it and even leaving a comment below. And then don't forget to help yourself by subscribing to our YouTube channel so you never miss another great Agoracom small cap video.